Before we begin, I'd like to say that this is a follow-up to a video I've already made. I would suggest that you watch that video before this one, as all the major characters have been covered in that one. In this video, I'll be tying up some loose ends. So, let's take a look at the cut characters and enemies of Half-Life 2. Skitch was a female alien cut from the game. She was from an unknown alien species and belonged to Alex Vance. Skitch was suggested to be added in the first year of development, when Dog was just a rough idea and belonged to Eli Maxwell. She was to have hypodermic teeth and, as suggested by a cut line by Alex, could kill a person with one bite. Alex and Skitch would have met Gordon for the first time when Gordon's train would have crashed right before the air exchange chapter started. Skitch was later merged with Dog as Alex's pet, while Kleiner was the one who ended up with a female pet alien, Lamar. Interestingly, Dabe Eng, a conceptual artist who worked on the Half-Life games, has two images uploaded on his personal portfolio called Jack and Arbiter. Both of these images have a creature in it that resembles Skitch to a certain extent. Manwich, also known as Animal, and Peters were part of Captain Vance's conscripts. Manwich was the conscript who we would cover while he would move up ahead in the alley of Sniper 029. Peters was the conscript who we would have to rescue from the APC right under the sniper's line of sight. There weren't any specific models made for these characters, so they all used the standard conscript model. The Ka-27 was a Soviet helicopter reused by the Combine for their military operations. This, of course, was cut in development and was replaced by the Hunter Chopper. It appeared in the 2001 and 2003 Canal maps before being cut. Sactix was a macro virus created by an alien warrior race. This alien race was the predecessor to the Combine, which used weaponized alien creatures in battle. These Sactix were to be delivered by pods, similar to how headcrab shellings were used in the retail game. There's quite a lot of details written as to how this worked, but the main thing of note is that the Sactic would attach itself to a living organism and drain out all their blood until they died. One use of them would be in the early Borealis chapters, where they would kill all the crew members, and the final survivor, Odell, would have to turn off the heat generator and let the ship freeze, as that was the only way to kill these things. In the end, Sactics were cut as the game had a drastic change of direction. There's a folder called T-Bot1 in the leaked files. There are textures for a robot or mech that would be used in the weather control chapter. The community members speculate that this T-Bot is actually Dog, and in appearance it would have the same model but with different textures. The files point towards the fact that T-Bot would have had an antenna and a flamethrower and was most likely an ancestor to the two-legged Combine synths that we will look at shortly. In the voice lines folder for Eli Maxwell, he tells us about something called the Storm, which might be the particle storm that was planned to be found in the wasteland areas. Let's take a listen to these sound files.
If you've never been out there before, I have one piece of advice. At the first flicker of green light, you run. First storm I saw, I made the mistake of stopping to study it. That's how I lost my leg. I've seen them take out whole squads, reeling in soldiers, tearing gunboats to bits. Some say it's only an electrical disturbance, but if you ask me, there's an intelligence in there somewhere. If only we could communicate with it. A force like that on our side. Now that would be a powerful ally.
From what he says, we know that it was a powerful entity, non-combined but rather wild, and emitted lights similar to how portals and resonance cascades' green color looked like. There are 4 more sounds of the particle storm itself, but unfortunately that's about it. We don't have a model or anything else for it. The sand barnacle would have been a variation of the barnacles, however, it was never finalized. Its model uses a flat color texture and it has no AI programmed. It is not found in any of the maps apart from the zoo model map from 2001. From its appearance, we know that it would have stood up from the ground and attacked the player in some way. Thankfully, the community was able to get some more information from David Spear, a video game designer who worked on the game since the start. He says that the sand barnacle was an idea for the Wasteland chapters, which later became the Coast chapters. The sand barnacle would have been hidden in the sand, and a little depression in the ground would have been a sign for the player to look out for it. If the player failed to see it, the sand barnacle would come out, grab the player, and pull them closer. Once near the sand barnacle, it would have started biting the player. Chucking grenades at them from afar would have been the ideal strategy to kill them. The alien Combine Soldier was the predecessor of the Combine Soldier. Its design was that of a worm or snake and would have moved like one too. Another version was created for it, which had a yellowish skin, yellow lenses, and an energy whip. This enemy was cut, and its design was reworked into the Combine Advisor. The Combine Synth Elite Soldier was part human, part synth. It was the predecessor to the Combine Elite and the Synth Combine Guard, who was cut as well. Along with T-Bot and Super Soldier, the community believes that this enemy is also a valid candidate for the fabled weather-controlled mech enemies that were mentioned in Mark Laidlaw's vignettes. This design was reworked into the Combine Guard and the Super Soldier, and at the end, the Combine Elite was the final product of all this development. One thing of note is how the legs are similar to those of a hunter. There were quite a few designs made for this enemy, and interestingly, all of them have its left arm more bigger than the right one. The Combine Attack Synth was to have 9 sensors on the front and 3 weapon barrels on each side. It was supposed to be a boss and would have been taller than a Strider and much more armored. Not much else is known about this enemy. The Combine Guard was one of the earliest humanoid-looking Combine units designed. Shortly after the initial conception of this enemy, it was split off into 2 to create the Metro Cops and the Combine Soldiers. With an all-black uniform with vertical straps and a long trench coat and white helmet, it was partly inspired by the German Schutzstaffel uniform from World War II. After further development, the 2 versions of the Combine Guard were recycled into the Metro Cop and Combine Soldier. Similar to how the Combine Soldier has an elite version in the retail game, the Metro Cops would have had an elite version as well. The elite Metro Cop was a little similar to how the Metro Cops look, but had a different helmet, yellow lenses, and red patches on the uniform. It's unclear which weapons these elite cops would have used in the game. At first, there wasn't any models for this enemy, but in the 2016 and 2017 Face Punch leaks, the community was able to get their hands on an original model. The Antlion King was a 6-eyed antlion that was supposed to be fought in the Antlion Caves. This was supposed to be the king of the Antlions and would have been 60 feet tall and would have been like a titan to fight with. When the team started to shift the Antlion presence to the surface rather than the caves, the Antlion King was cut. This idea of a patriarchal ruler was reused for episode 2, where the Antlion King concept was recycled into the Antlion Guardian enemy. Now before I end the video, let's look at some minor cut creatures and aliens. The Combine Mobile Mine was like a tick creature and would have worked like a trip mine. The Gas Flyer was an enemy who would have used its gases to stun lock the player and attack in flocks. The Sewer Fauna was a 5 feet long creature who would have hopped around using its body like a spring and pounce on the player. The Stampeder was a large alien creature who had hairy protrusions coming out of its legs and would have had fangs inside its mouth. The Tripod Hopper was a 3-legged creature who would have hopped around to jump on the player's head to attack them. It would have let out some sort of liquid from its mouth to damage the player. Then we have these two unnamed alien creatures. One looks like Zen fauna, while the other one looks like an alien rat with whiskers and would have been 5 feet tall. And lastly, we have this unnamed synth. And there you have it. These were more cut characters and enemies of Half-Life 2. I think I've covered a majority, or maybe 95% of them at this point, but if I did miss any, let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.